Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I share 16 easy to direct sow annual flowers. So let's go. Today is February 11th, 2025. I wanted to share 2 years ago today, so February 11th, 2023, I created and uploaded my first YouTube video. I got a notification this morning about it, and I was so surprised that 2 years have gone by. I wanted to thank you for the last 2 years. It's been a lot of fun for me creating videos related to gardening, especially gardening on a budget. As you know, I really enjoy making videos that show a lot about how to propagate plants. I also love just showing you my yard and projects that I'm working on in my yard. For any of you that have subscribed, thank you for subscribing, and don't forget to hit the notification bell because sometimes you might miss new videos that I make, and if you hit that notification bell, it'll automatically tell you every time I upload a video. And many of you have been wonderful about hitting the like button or the thumbs up button on my videos, as well as sharing my channel with other people and then interacting with me and other people through the comment section. More than anything else, that means a lot to me because that shows me that you are enjoying my content and it inspires me to continue making this kind of content for you. I came up with the idea for this video for a number of reasons. I think it's a good video for anyone that's new to gardening. I also think this content will be good for anyone that really doesn't like to grow plants indoors under grow lights or through the winter sowing process. And then finally, I created this content for myself so I could learn a little bit more about plants that are easy to direct sow outside, and then to share that with you in case you didn't know about it. When you grow plants from seed, you're saving so much money because each of those seed packets have a ton of seeds in them. And when you buy a 6-pack or a 4-pack of plants from the garden center, that costs almost the same as maybe a seed packet would cost you. Now there are some annual flowers that are very hard to start from seed. That's not what this video is about. I made this video to inspire you, to encourage you to grow some flowers from seed. And these are seeds that are very easy if you just direct sow them in your garden. And not only are these seeds easy to grow, they should germinate for you pretty quickly. And a majority of the plants I'm going to go over are called cut and come again flowers, which means as you continue to cut on them for, let's say, a bouquet or for a vase, the flowers will continue producing for you. And that's what cut and come again means. But just remember, not all plants do that. You want to make sure that you read your seed packet or you do your proper research. Plants that like to branch out are the varieties that are usually good for cut and come again. For many of the flowers I'm going to talk about today, they come in lots of different varieties, lots of different colors, and even different heights. All these flowers thrive in full sun, which means you want to be giving them at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight per day. And many of these flowers self-seed. What that means is that they'll bloom for you, and then as the season ends and you let the plants go to seed, they'll drop their seeds, and then the following year, even though it's an annual, you'll have these plants again in your garden. A lot of these plants like to be direct sown after any threat of frost. If you don't know what your average frost date is, you can look at the link down below, enter your zip code, and it will tell you what your average last frost date is. And then you can also go on the map there, and that will also give you a better indicator of your date. So for example, for me, where I live based on my zip code, my average last frost date is May 15th. But around May 15th, I also look at the weather forecast, and I carefully watch it to make sure that there's no frost coming 10 days later, just so that I'm safe when I'm planting out these seeds. Almost all of these plants attract some form of pollinator. It could be a bee, it could be a hummingbird, it can be a bird. There are a lot of different pollinators that these plants will attract. Even if a plant is considered rabbit resistant, when a plant is very small, very young, it's tender, and rabbits are apt to nibble on them. So you'll definitely want to protect those younger seedlings, especially if the rabbits are fond of them. Many of the plants I'm going to talk about, I've actually made videos showing you my process for collecting the seeds on those plants. If you are going to grow any of these plants, I highly recommend you collect the seeds from them at the end of the year. So what I'll do is I'll add a link to a playlist down below that just shows you the process for collecting the seeds from many of these plants. The plants are in alphabetical order. We're going to start with alyssum. You want to sow the seeds after your average last frost date. You want to surface sow them because the seeds need light to germinate, which means you just want to sow the seeds and press them into the soil surface. There are a lot of great varieties of alyssum, but sweet alyssum is the one that attracts the beneficial insects such as hoverflies, lacewings, and parasitic wasps. And these beneficial insects actually control the aphid population. Bachelor's button seeds should be sown after your last frost date. However, you may be safe if you sow them about 1 week before that date. You want to plant the seeds 1/4 of an inch deep because the seeds need darkness to germinate. The flowers make for a great cut flower, and they are even a cut and come again type of flower. The plant is considered invasive in certain areas, so before you plant it in your yard, double check and make sure it's not invasive in your area. You don't want to be transplanting bachelor buttons around your yard because they don't like to have their roots disturbed. Borage is a beautiful herb with a blue flower. You want to plant it after any danger of frost. The seeds get planted 1/4 of an inch deep, and it makes for a great cut flower. The plant repels cabbage worms, tomato hornworms, slugs, and snails. It also attracts parasitic wasps, hoverflies, and lacewings. If you are trying to bring hummingbirds to your yard, they do love the flower of borage, and the plant is considered drought tolerant. The seeds for calendula, also known as pot marigold, should be sown after any danger of frost. You might be able to sow the seeds 1 to 2 weeks before, but I'd be a little careful. You want to plant the seeds 1/4 of an inch deep. They do need darkness to germinate. Even though we love growing this plant for its beautiful orange and yellow flowers, it is also considered a trap crop. So by planting it, it actually invites aphids, whiteflies, and thrips to it, which you might not like. However, that's good if you plant it near other plants such as Swiss chard, peppers, kale, tomatoes, as well as other plants, because it will actually protect those plants and it will send those insects over to it instead of to those plants that you really want. The hummingbirds are quite fond of this plant. Cleome is also known as spider flower, and you want to plant the seeds after any danger of frost. The seeds get sown 1/4 of an inch deep, and they need light to germinate. It makes for a great cut flower. The hummingbirds are attracted to it, and the plant is considered drought tolerant. You want to plant the seeds of cosmos after the danger of frost, and you want to get those seeds planted about 1/4 of an inch deep, because they do need light to germinate. It makes for a great cut and come again cut flower, and it attracts the hummingbirds. There are a lot of different kinds of marigolds. You want to plant the seeds after any danger of frost, and you want to plant them 1/4 of an inch deep because the seeds need light to germinate. If you want to repel the pests, the French marigold is the best variety for you. Some of the pests that the marigolds repel include whiteflies, carrot flies, beetles, leafhoppers, mosquitoes, nematodes, and even some rabbits as well as deer. Marigolds can also be considered a trap crop. Again, that means attracting pests so that the pests will come and the marigold will lure them away from the crops that you really care about. And some of those pests that the marigolds lure include thrips as well as tomato fruit borers. The plants are considered drought tolerant, and some of the taller varieties make for a great cut and come again flower. You want to sow the Mexican sunflower or tithonia seeds after any danger of frost, and the seeds get sown about 1/2 of an inch deep, although they do need light to germinate, so just be careful you're not sowing them too deep. It has deep roots which improve your soil by breaking up any compaction as well as improving the aeration. The flowers attract hummingbirds as well as butterflies. You want to sow the moonflower seeds after any danger of frost. It's advised that you soak the seeds for 24 hours, or you can scarify or nick the seeds. The key is you want to open up the seeds a little bit so that they can germinate easier. The seeds should get sown about 1/2 of an inch deep, and they make for a great privacy screen as well as a vertical garden interest. Did you know that the moonflower is a host plant to the hummingbird moth as well as the sphinx moth? What's also interesting is the flowers open in the late afternoon and they close in the morning hours. Morning glory is very similar, but it is different to the moonflower. You want to sow its seeds after any danger of frost. You also want to soak the seeds 24 hours or scarify or nick those seeds. They get planted 1/2 of an inch deep. They also make for a great privacy screen or vertical garden interest. They attract the hummingbirds, and once established, the plants are considered drought tolerant. Nasturtium seeds should get sown after any danger of frost. You want to soak the seeds for about 4 to 8 hours and then plant them about 1/2 of an inch deep because they need darkness to germinate. The plants repel a number of pests, including whiteflies, squash bugs, aphids, and cabbage loopers. Interestingly enough, the plant is also considered a trap crop to aphids as well as flea beetles. It also attracts a lot of beneficial insects like hoverflies that will eat those aphids. Nasturtium makes for a great cut and come again cut flower, and it really attracts the hummingbirds. The roots are known to improve soil health, and it's a plant that you don't want to lift and transplant. You want to just plant it and leave it there. The seeds of nigella, also known as love in a mist, can be sown as soon as you can work the ground or the soil, which is typically about 1 to 2 weeks before your average last frost date. You're going to sow the seeds about 1/4 of an inch deep, as they need light to germinate. The flowers are a great cut and come again cut flower. It's a plant that you don't want to transplant because it doesn't like to have its roots disturbed. You can actually sow the seeds of poppies in the late fall, anytime during the winter, or during the very early spring months, about 1 month before your average last frost date. You want to surface sow those seeds because they need light to germinate, and you want to make sure you're sowing them in an area where it's not heavily mulched. Poppies do not like to have their roots disturbed, so once you plant them, just leave them. You don't want to be moving them around. The poppy seeds are actually food for many birds as well as mice. Sunflower seeds can be sown anytime after the danger of frost has passed, and you want to sow the seeds about 1 inch deep because they need darkness to germinate. The deep roots of a sunflower plant improve the soil because they break up compaction, and they also improve aeration. Even though all varieties of sunflowers make for a great cut flower, only some varieties are considered cut and come again. The flowers attract the hummingbirds, and it's a plant that you don't want to transplant once you've sown the seeds. You can sow the seeds of sweet peas about 2 to 3 weeks before your average last frost date. It's a good idea to soak the seeds for at least 24 hours before you sow them, and you want to sow them about 1 inch deep. Sweet peas do not like to have their roots disturbed, so you don't want to be transplanting it after you sow the seeds. Last but definitely not least are zinnias. You want to sow the seeds after your average last frost date, and the seeds get sown about 1/4 of an inch deep. They make for a great cut and come again cut flower, and they attract the hummingbirds. I'm sure this list is not fully comprehensive, but I think it gives you a fair idea of annual flowers that you can easily direct sow in your yard. Let me know if there are any other annual flowers that you've had success direct sowing, and what were some of your secrets or tips that you want to share. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.